Hey y'all, what's going on? Blake back again. Today we're going to talk about new Capenna cards, the best of the rest since last time we talked about all the commanders. Yeah, best of the rest, cards you're going to see in your 99, all that sort of stuff, you know, non-legendary stuff. I'm going to try a different format this time. I'm going to not do tier lists because I think it might save me a little bit of time compared to last time, which took almost 2 hours trying to get through all the cards. But this time we're going to be talking about a few less cards, and I'm just going to stick to mostly just cards I think are, you know, worth playing, relevant, or cards that you will see, that maybe I think aren't worth playing. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk about the cards in general, what I think of them, where they might see homes, maybe how you should play around them, that sort of stuff. I'll stick to my ratings of like this card's very good, good, best in the set, that sort of stuff. But I'm not gonna go like you know, the tier list whole thing. So let me know what y'all think of this format though. I still want it to be comprehensive, but I'm trying to make it a bit more concise. So I'm kind of deciding where I want these set reviews sort of to land. But yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's get started. We got quite a few cards to talk about still. We're gonna go through the commander deck cards first, like we normally do, and then go into the main set. First card we're going to talk about is a pretty solid one. It's Angelic Extortionist, 3 white for a 4/3 flyer. Whenever Angelic Extortionist enters the battlefield or deals combat damage to a player, exile up to one target non-land permanent for as long as this card remains exiled. Its owner may cast it. Whenever another player casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. If any of y'all have ever played Ghostly Pilfer, it's a 2-mana 2/2 that can become unblockable and has some other effects. But the main words on the card is that if somebody casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, you draw a card. And usually that's just good enough for that card to see quite a bit of play for just a 2-mana 2/2 just to have that effect. Now this card has that text, which is very nice. It's going to draw you a decent amount of cards because whenever somebody has their Prosper deck and they're casting tons of spells from exile, or they're just casting their commanders, you're going to get your cards out of this card. But also, this card can kind of be, you know, temporary removal on a stick, or it allows you to actually replay value creatures that we've been getting more and more of in white to re-trigger ETBs. It can since you can cast it, it kind of acts as almost like a flicker if the card you're exiling isn't very much mana. So yeah, Angelic Extortionist is just a really good role player. Does a lot of things. It will get you card advantage, and it can also kind of remove things temporarily that are in your way or causing problems. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Angelic Extortionist. I think this card will see a decent amount of play. I think it's solid, very solid. Excuse me. Next card, Angelic Sleuth, 2 white for a 2/3 flyer. Whenever another permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, investigate. I don't think this card's very good. So a card that sees some play is Bygone Bishop, and Bygone Bishop is significantly better than this card. Mainly because all you have to do is just play creatures for Bygone Bishop to work. This one, you have to have permanents leave the battlefield, and they have to have counters on them. I'm just not about this card. I don't even think Bygone Bishop's really that great. It's a nice card, but it's a very slow card advantage because you have to spend all this mana to crack these clues to even get your cards back. So having all said that, this is just a worse Bygone Bishop, and Bygone Bishop's just kind of whatever. So I don't think if you see this card, it's probably because it's in the precon, but I don't think you should really play this card in just regular commander unless it finds some very niche home. Next up, Jailbreak. I really like this card. 1 white for a sorcery. Return target permanent card in an opponent's graveyard to the battlefield under their control. When that permanent enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target permanent card with equal or lesser value from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the reason I like this card a lot is it gives you total control of what happens. It doesn't let the opponent choose the thing in their graveyard and then you get to choose a thing in your graveyard based on what they choose. No. You get to choose. You make all the decisions here, similar to why Tragic Arrogance is good. So what you can do is you can, give them back their, I don't know, whatever like utility creature died earlier, like a Birds of Paradise or something. And then you can get like a, a fetch land, a 0 mana rock, all sorts of cool stuff with just that effect. Or you can just get a land for a land for only 2 mana. Yeah, I really like the flexibility of this card. You can also just give them back some random 3-drop and get back a 3-drop yourself. That's really powerful. This card just does a lot. And the fact that it just gives you total control, and you can even buy a little bit of political favor with this card. I'm a big fan of this card. I haven't heard much hype around this card, so I don't think other people have kind of caught on to it or think it's that good. But I would highly recommend you try this out. I think it'll impress you and the people that you're playing with. Next up, Grand Crescendo. X white for an instant. Create X 1/1 citizen creature tokens. Creatures you control gain indestructible till end of turn. Okay, so this card reads funny, but it's basically just white instant speed. Give all your creatures indestructible, and then any extra mana that you have, you can throw it in and get some free 1/1s. And honestly, that's a pretty good effect. I really like that. I will play like Rootborn defenses and 3 mana ways to do this effect all the time in my go wide decks. And I'll just take a 2 mana version of it, sure. And then the upside of making additional creatures when I have extra mana is a pretty reasonable upside. So, yeah, Grand Crescendo, I expect to see quite a bit of play. It's not like super flashy, but it's a really good role player, I think. If you're in a go wide deck and you're in white, this is probably going to make the cut. Next up is a common, Angelic Overseer. 2 and a white for a 2/1 flyer. It's an angel and a cleric. Types are pretty relevant here. When it enters the battlefield, you gain a life and draw a card. Pretty simple effect. We like Elvish Visionaries. We've already seen a decent amount of, at least I have, Priest of Ancient Lore, which is just the non-flying version of this that came from the D&D set. And yeah, this has more relevant types than that did, I would say. And it gives you flying, so it can chip in with your flying matter stacks, or it can chip in and hit some planeswalkers. This card's just a great role player. It's good in flicker decks, good all over the place. So this card's just really solid. It'll see a decent amount of play, for sure. Next up, Master of Ceremonies. 3 and a white for a 3/4. Rhino Druid. White Druids, interesting. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent chooses money, friends, or secrets. For each player who chose money, you and that player create a treasure. Friends is a 1/1 citizen. And then secrets is each of you draw a card. I don't like this card. I think this card's pretty mediocre, actually. You have to wait a whole turn rotation before you get anything out of this. The body is not good. The creature types are not good for this card. And then, like, your opponents realistically should either choose something that's going to make them have a much better payoff for it, or they're just going to give you, like, the tokens. They're just going to give you the worst thing out of these options, which is what will happen most of the time. You'll just get, like, 3 tokens, which isn't, like, awful, but if this ever becomes a problem or is annoying, then, like, people just kill this. And I don't think you're almost ever going to get the draw card off this. If you get a treasure, I guess you're kind of happy, but just 1 treasure is pretty whatever. I just don't think this card does enough, and the fact that your opponents get full control over what happens here, like, you don't get a vote in this, it's just your opponents get a vote. I don't really like this card. I don't think it's like that good. Next up is a really interesting card, Resourceful Defense. 2 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target permanent you control. 4 and a white. Move any number of counters from target permanent you control to another target permanent you control. This card is insanely flexible. You can move loyalty counters from planeswalkers to planeswalkers, although that is mana intensive. Still fairly interesting and can be powerful. The main thing I see this being is just like another Ozolith. So you put this out when your 1/1 counters deck. As some of your stuff dies with 1/1 counters, you just move them onto your other creatures. You don't have to go to combat or do all that mess. You just get to move all the counters around normally. But there are some cute things that you can do. If like your board gets wiped, you can at least move all of your counters onto like a land or something that's not going to die, and then kind of save them in like a way that you know, similar to the Ozolith, but it's not as you know, easy to lose it all when they blow up your Ozolith, because you can just store them on the land, and then if you bring this back later, which is pretty easy to do with Sun Titan, Savine's Reclamation, that sort of stuff. If you watch my white video, you know about the usefulness of 3 CMC permanents like this. Then yeah, then it can be a little bit better in those circumstances. But I'm mostly just looking at this as like a Ozolith 2.0, a little bit more mana intensive, but it essentially does the same thing. And honestly, I'll pay 3 mana for an Ozolith. If I need it, I'll need it. So yeah, this card's cool. It's also got some really cute other synergies and stuff you can do with it. So you'll see this card. This card's pretty sweet. Next up, Skyboon Evangelists, 4 and a white for a 3/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you support 6. Put a 1/1 counter up to each of 6 other target creatures. Not many people know what support does, so I figured I should read it. Whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, that creature gains flying until end of turn. I'm mostly interested in this for this last ability, because this is going to put counters on basically everything. Support 6 is going to just cover everything. And then, I don't know, I sometimes find myself playing the, what's it called? Abzan Falconer or whatever it is, the one that can outlast and gives your creatures with 1/1 counters on them flying. I'm not afraid of playing that card in a 1/1 counters deck, and I would definitely rather play this over that card for sure. In your 1/1 counters deck, sometimes you have just a bunch of ground idiots that just get fat and don't have evasion, and this is a great way to give them evasion. It also pumps them all up and puts counters on your creatures that don't have counters. So yeah, I think it's just a good card, good role player in your counters decks. It's not stellar, but it does something that the decks are looking for, and it does it better than most of the other options similar to this card. So I like Skyboon Evangelist. Next up, Smuggler Share. We heard you wanted a white card draw, so we printed this card. 2 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of each end step, draw a card for each opponent who drew 2 or more cards this turn. Then create a treasure for each opponent who had 2 or more lands enter the battlefield under their control this turn. This card's pretty stupid in terms of design. Like, I don't know. This just feels like, you know how they made Dockside Extortionist because they failed with Treasure Nabber? This feels like they missed with Monologue Tax, so they wanted to print this card. I know that's like not exactly. I'm sure that's not what happened, but like it just feels like that. Yeah, this card is just such a boring design. You don't have to do anything. It's just value staple into a white card, and the value is pretty easy to obtain. Your opponents want to draw cards and play more lands because that's what you need to do in Commander. So this card's just going to trigger. It's going to trigger at random intervals. So it's not like reliable. You can't always like, you know, get a treasure from each opponent every turn or draw a card from each opponent every turn. But it can trigger multiple times from on the same turn from different opponents, which probably won't come up very often, but it is a thing. Yeah, I mean, this card's good. I think it's probably receiving a little bit overhyped considering the pre-order price was like $30 for this card. It'll definitely be like come down. This will be like a $10 or $15 card probably. This card is good, but it's very boringly good, and you'll see it, but yeah, it's just a boring good card. That's all there is to it, just generic value. Next up, In Too Deep, white for an aura. Split second, enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. Enchanted permanent is a colorless clue artifact with the clue text and loses all other abilities. So this card, the reason this card says enchant clue is just because once you put this on the creature or planeswalker that you want to remove, it would fall off if it didn't say clue, because once it becomes the clue, then it has to be able to enchant that clue, otherwise it falls off, yada yada yada. So that's yeah. That's what this thing does. So is this card good? It's fine. The split second's really nice on this card. You will be able to get rid of the thing that you want to get rid of. Blue has a hard time dealing with creatures and planeswalkers, mostly planeswalkers. Creatures, they have some tools with Pongify and Rapid Hybridization, that sort of stuff. And now Suspend and stuff like that, Reality Shift, you know, those cards. But this is another tool in the toolbox, I'd say. I'm probably only looking at playing this in like mono blue or something where I don't have good ways to kill creatures. Maybe Simic. Probably not though. At that point I have like Beast Within and stuff like that. So I don't think I need that many removal spots where I'm going in too deep. But if you care about maybe some other text on this card, like the fact that it's an enchantment or something like that, then you could be interested in this card. I think this card's really cool. Is it great? No, it's just fine. But this card's cool. You'll see it at commander tables every once in a while. Next up, Body Count. 2 and a black for an instant with Spectacle Black. Draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. This card's interesting. Obviously, I like it because of the Spectacle cost. That's the only time that you're gonna, kind of trigger this. Notably, the Spectacle cost is going to trigger when you like ping them with a Blood Artist, which is probably what I'm looking at here since this is an instant. I'm just going to set up my Aristocrats board, and then as my opponent goes to board wipe me, I go, okay, you take this damage, and then it triggers Spectacle, and then I can cast this afterwards and draw a ton of cards. So yeah, I think that card's cool. I think this card's cool for that reason. I think I like this card a little better than Liliana's Standard Bearer, the one that's like a 3/1 with Flash for 3 mana that does this thing where you draw a card for each creature that died this turn or whatever. I think I like this card better, even though it's not a creature, just because it's, in the decks that you're going to play it in, you're always going to Spectacle it. So I don't have to leave up 3 mana, which can be really awkward. I can just leave up 1 random mana. So I do like this card. Liliana Standard Bearer is not like a format staple or anything. It sees some fringe play. But Body Count's just a card I think I would in general rather play on that card. I think it's a decent upgrade to that card, so I might start looking to this card instead of that. Because Liliana Standard Bearer feels like a card I always want to be playing in my sacrifice decks, but it just never quite makes the cut. And I feel like this card definitely could. Next up, Lethal Scheme. 2 black for an instant. Interestingly, it has Convoke. Destroy target creature planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Scheme connives. This card is sweet. The main thing is that this spell is just free. You can tap, if you tap black creatures, it pays for the black mana on this card, unlike other similar effects like Improvise. Convoke works in that way. You can still pay the generic with anything, but you can actually pay the black mana with black creatures. So if you have 4 creatures, you can tap them all, kill a creature or planeswalker, and each of those creatures connives, which is a really, really sweet upside of this card. You already want to convoke this thing, and it just gives you even more payoff for convoking it. Because drawing and discarding is very nice, especially if you're in black. Then you're going to want to be putting things into your graveyard, so that way you can get them back. Yeah, Lethal Scheme is a great card. I haven't seen this card getting a ton of hype, but this card is excellent. Try it out in your black decks, especially your like black sort of Reanimator, things you wanting to put things in your graveyard sort of decks. Next up, Determined Iteration. 1 and a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate. The token created this way gains haste, sacrificing at the beginning of the next end step. This card's really cool design. I really like this card. The rate is good. 2 mana for this effect. And you can get it the turn that you play it because you can trigger it right when you go to combat. I think all that adds up to a pretty playable card. Obviously, red tokens is not like a super... popular effect, but yeah, I like this card. Yeah, it'll see some homes. It's a cool card. I think the rate's good enough. Next, Indulge and Excess. So 2 and a red for a sorcery. When a creature you control attacks this turn, create a 1/1 green citizen that's tapped and attacking. Excess, this is Aftermath, 1 and a red, sorcery. Create a treasure token for each creature you control that dealt combat damage to a player this turn. Importantly, that you have both of these are sorceries, and you have to cast them kind of in the order that the card says you do. It really wants you to cast Indulge main phase 1 and then Excess main phase 2. That being said, I think Indulge is kind of just a playable card on its own. It's just a pretty solid card if you want to go wide in a red deck. It makes a lot of material. And excess is just a nice upside. It'll probably get you your mana back from Indulge slash the mana you paid for excess. So I think all that adds up to a pretty sweet card. I don't think this card is insane or anything, but it's nice. I like the rate on it, and I think the effect's good enough to make some decks. Next up, Industrial Advancement. 3 in a red for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library. X is the creature's mana value. You may put a creature from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So interestingly, most cards like this say like the creature has to have lesser CMC or something like that, but this one doesn't. You can put any creature you reveal into play. Now, if you're not looking at if you sack a small creature and you're not looking at very many cards, then obviously you're not likely to hit a big idiot to put into play for free. But I think this card's interesting. 4 mana is like kind of a little bit of a steep rate for this effect, I think. But the fact that you can get it immediately when you go to your end step. This triggers is pretty nice. Yeah, I like this card. Once again, this is just another card I think is cool. Has a nice effect. It'll definitely find a home somewhere. But it's just a cool card. Just a solid card. Yeah, you'll see this card somewhere. Life of the Party. Now this card's kind of crazy. 3 in a red for a 0/1. With first strike, trample, and haste. When this creature attacks, it gets +X+0, where X is the number of creatures you control. When Life of the Party enters the battlefield, if it's not a token, each opponent creates a token that's a copy of it. The tokens are goaded for the rest of the game. So that's pretty sweet. The fact that the tokens just are goaded, you don't have to like re-goad them. They're not goaded for the turn you put them in. They're just goaded forever, even if this card's not here anymore. Is really nice. There's extremely low downside to giving people tokens outside of the normal stuff that giving people tokens causes problems with, such as like Astronaut's Altars and sacrifice effects, where your opponents can get some value out of them. But this card's pretty sweet. You can even do some fun stuff like flickering it and giving them a ton of these creatures, and then they're all huge and they all have to swing at each other, and they're all annoying to block. Because they'll just trade, and the person who blocked will take a ton of damage and won't be able to retaliate, and all sorts of fun stuff with this card. This card's just cool. It'll just get some homes and be cool. That's it. Next up, Reign of Riches. Red 3 enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 treasure tokens. The first spell you cast each turn that you cast that has... Whenever you cast your first spell each turn with treasure, you cascade. I don't know why I couldn't read that. But yeah, this card is pretty cool. I think this card is insanely overhyped. But I think the hype is dying down a little bit. So I think it's probably going to the hype might eventually reach where this card is, which this card's cool. It's just cool for like treasure decks. I don't think this card's like that great anywhere else outside of treasure decks. You're not going to play this in a Cascade deck, I don't think. The rate on this card is just really bad. 5 mana. I mean, you get 2 of it back in treasures, but this is a pretty steep cost to pay for this effect, so you got to really want it, or be able to take care of it, take advantage of it in a really cool way. Because just the 2 treasures it gives you means that it'll spot you the first 2 cascades. If somebody doesn't blow up your treasure or this, but yeah, you can only get 1 cascade each turn anyway. So yeah, this card's just like fine. I think even in like dedicated treasure decks, if this card's a problem, it's just the rate on this card's high enough where people will be able to reasonably have time to have an answer by the time you play this card. So I think this card's just fine. It's cool. It's pretty cool in like treasure tribal decks that now have an insane amount of support apparently. But yeah, this card's just fine. I don't think this card's busted or insane. It's just good. And the decks that want to play it. And I think those decks are not widespread. I think this card just got overhyped probably because of the insane amount of treasure cards that were getting printed. And this is just one of them that made it look like treasure was going to be completely insane. But I think it's just fine. Next up, Rose Room Treasure. 3 in a red for a 4/3. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you create a treasure. For the first and second time. The third time, you pay X, and you can fireball something. Obviously, the only thing you care about on this card is, like, you want to trigger this thing twice a turn if you can and make 2 treasures. I think this card's significantly better than the last one. I think this card is going to act similar to Bergie in some situations, where play a creature, get a treasure, which allows you to play a creature and get another treasure. So it can this card can kind of snowball. That being said, paying 4 mana for this effect, and it only triggers up to twice a turn. You can't get more than that. Makes this card also just fine. Yeah, this card can actually produce a decent amount of treasure, but it does it in a reasonable time frame. So yeah, there's not an easy way to like break this card, but it will consistently make you a good amount of treasure. So it's a pretty good card. Next up, Seize the Spotlight. 2 and a red for a sorcery. Each opponent chooses Fame or Fortune. For each player who chooses Fame, you gain control of a creature that player controls. Untap it against haste. For each player who chooses Fortune, you draw a card and create a treasure. So obviously your opponents are very incentivized to give you one of their creatures. But I think where this has a really good home is in decks that can consistently sack creatures. Especially decks like Marchesa the Black Rose, where if they give you a creature, you can probably put a counter on it and then sack it and then keep it. Then they're very disincentivized to take that mode. And if you can just make this, if you can incentivize your opponents enough where this is a draw 3, create 3 treasure, obviously this card's insane. Is it that? No, obviously not. But you can kind of make the board state into a way and build your deck in a way where your opponents are much more incentivized to do that. And if you can do that, then I think this card will be a very good card in your deck. That being said, just generically, if you just throw this in some random red deck with very little synergy, I think this card will still be like okay, passable. But yeah, Active Treasoning, a thing from each of your opponents, is like kind of a whatever effect. Because yeah, I don't know. Active Treason is just not that good of a card. Active Treasoning 1 card from each of your opponents is like fine. For 3 mana, that's a reasonable rate. But yeah, you mostly want the last mode, so you want to incentivize your opponents to pick that mode. Yeah, this card's good. Kaldaya Guardian. I don't know. Maybe that's how you say it. Green and 3. Human Soldier for 4/3. When it or another creature you control with mana value 4 or greater dies, you create 2 citizens. It has Blitz of 2 and a green. I think this card's pretty interesting. This card I think this card is going to be good in a green-black sacrifice deck. Green-black plus another color or whatever. Mostly just green and black is where I'm interested in this. Especially because this just makes your Chonker split into more material. This will split into more material. It'll give you a lot of bodies over the course of, sacking your board for various effects. Whether you're reanimating and then sacking or, doing whatever you're doing. This is just, if you need things to sack, this is going to give you quite a bit of material. Even on its face, 4 mana for 3 bodies is a fine rate. I've played that before in sacrifice decks, and that's fine. And this has reasonable upside to it, where if you have other creatures that are of higher CMC mana value, like Sanger Autocrats or whatever that you've disposed of their other tokens with, then yeah, this card can make a lot of material. I like this card in green-black sort of decks. I'm not interested in playing this in green decks. I'm not interested in playing this in go-wide decks, anything like that. Just specifically sacrifice decks where I can take advantage of this effect more than just on this creature. And especially when the extra bodies that give me are good for other effects like sack fodder and such. Next up, Cryptic Pursuit. 2 red-blue for an enchantment. When you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, manifest the top card of your library. That's pretty good as it is. But it also says, whenever a face-down creature you control dies, exile it. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast that card until the end of your next turn. This card is just awesome in Spellslinger decks. It gives you... One of the things that sucks about Spellslinger decks is you don't put a lot of material on the board, so you're usually pretty open to attacks while you're doing all your spells things, because the creatures that you are running in your Spellslinger decks aren't really like you don't really throw them away like your Talrens and Archmage Emerituses and all that sort of stuff. They're not creatures you exactly, protect yourself with. So the fact that as you're playing or you're, making your game plan happen, you're making a good amount of material that you can use to preserve your life total, or start taking out creatures with multi-blocks and stuff that are coming at you is nice. And then also you don't even lose the value of, if you don't lose any value, because anything that you would have that you manifested die, if it's a card you actually care about, aka an instant or sorcery, you can just cast it until the end of your next turn. So that's sweet. If it's an instant, you can just cast it before your turn even begins. If it's, if you have the mana available, or, you're never really losing the cards. You always have a chance to get them. So this is kind of pseudo card draw while also protecting you. This also doesn't say the first instant or sorcery you cast this turn, which a lot of cards like this have said recently. So yeah, this card is just awesome. I really like this card. It's just going to go great in your Spellslinger decks. Next up, Life Insurance, another super sweet enchantment. 3 white, black for an enchantment. It has Extort, and whenever a non-token creature dies, you lose a life and create a treasure token. The rate on this card, 5 mana, is somewhat steep. But then again, if you look at a card like Revel in Riches, which people play a ton, that's 5 mana, and it only gives you treasures when your opponent's creatures die. And this is just whenever a any non-token dies, which is really sweet. And then this also has the added upside of Extort to help you, get back your life that you have lost from this card, as well as gain you some extra life, ping your opponents, all the good Extort things. Yeah, this card's sweet. You're going to see this card a decent amount, I think. Obscura Confluence. I think most of these Confluences suck, but I think this one is playable, and I'll explain why. So this one is the Esper one. 1 white, blue, black. Choose 3 modes. You may choose the same mode more than once. This is an instant. Until end of turn, target a creature loses all abilities and becomes base power and toughness 1/1. Okay. Target creature connives. Target player returns a creature from their graveyard to their hand. So what I'm interested in this card is basically the last mode, and then sometimes I will choose the first mode. And then if I'm in a deck that really wants to discard something that's in my hand, I might choose Connives once. But yeah, Connives is basically blank text. It's basically 4 mana, instant speed, put 3 creatures back in my hand from my graveyard, or, put 2 back and turn your threat that's attacking me into a 1/1. Then I block it, so then you get no effects, and it goes back to the command zone or whatever. Yeah, I don't think this card's stellar, but this card is, playable, I guess. It's mostly just the last mode that I'm interested in. Yeah, this card's fine. Okay, so now we're moving on to the main set. That's everything I wanted to talk about from the commander decks. Like I said, if I didn't talk about a card, which I didn't talk about a lot of cards in the commander decks, it's because I think that they suck, and probably won't see hardly any play outside of exactly the precons. Yeah, it's what it is. So let's move on to the main set. We're going to start off with a Planeswalker, Vivian on the Hunt. 4 green for 4 loyalty Planeswalker. +2, you may sacrifice creature. If you do, you get to Birthing Pod. So you search for a creature with equal to 1 plus the sacrifice creature's mana value, put on the battlefield and shuffle. +1, mill 5 cards, put a number of creature cards milled this way into your hand. -1, create a 4/4 Rhino, and it has no ultimate. This card sucks unless you're doing broken things with the +2. The +1 will draw you a creature, maybe 2, if you're playing an extremely creature dense deck. Otherwise, it may not even draw you a card. The creating a Rhino is obviously useless. 6 mana, -1 to create a Rhino is pretty embarrassing. But yeah, it's just exactly, this is just a combo card. If you're doing broken things with the +2, not value things, broken things. If you're doing broken things, this card's playable. I don't think this card's even playable if you're doing value things. If you're just like a utility Birthing Pod deck, where you're just Rec Saging into 4-drop into like a value 4-drop into a value 5-drop or something, I don't think this card's worth playing because this 6 mana is not worth it for doing this effect once. If you're really lucky, twice. But people are not going to let you untap with this card after you play it because you just have the chance to just like randomly win the game, and you can say that you won't, but people won't trust you and they'll just kill this. And this, I mean, the reason this card sucks is just because it's a Planeswalker, and Planeswalkers suck in our format unless they're doing insane things, and this one can. But if you're not doing that insane thing, then don't play this card. Next up, Depopulate. 2 white for a sorcery. Each player who controls a multicolored creature draws a card, then destroy all creatures. This is a fine 4-mana board wipe. Giving each... I mean, whenever you cast this card, it's pretty likely that you're going to give each player a card because most people will have their commanders. And there's not a lot of monocolored commander happening nowadays. But I think that's totally fine. The main thing is that you get your card back when you cast this. Almost certainly. But even if you don't, it's like 4-mana board wipes are just fine. And then I think the upside of you being able to replace your board wipe with another card is pretty nice. So this is just a fine 4-mana board wipe. Not much to say. Extraction Specialist. I love this card. This card is 2 and a white for a 3/2 with lifelink. It's a human rogue, if that's relevant. When it enters the battlefield, you return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature can't attack or block as long as you control Extraction Specialist. This card seems very easy to loop with. It's just pretty good value. It's a pretty reasonable body that gets you back your utility creatures, your Knight of the White Orchids, your Caustic Caterpillars, your just whatever. Yeah, I think this card is just excellent. This card just brings back a lot of material. When you Sun Titan this, you get to bring this and another thing back with your Sun Titan. Yeah, this card obviously loops with a Sack Outlet and Sappy Eriksdottir and cards like that. Yeah, this card is super sweet. Even outside of the combo potential, I think that this card is just a really good value card. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think this is just a really good role player. So yeah, I think you'll see this card a decent amount, and it will be good. Next up is Halo Fountain. 2 and a white for an artifact. You pay a white, tap it, and untap a tapped creature you control. You create a citizen. 2 white, and you do the same thing for 2 creatures. You draw a card. 5 white, and untap 15 creatures. You win the game. I think this card is not good, but I'm glad people are excited about it. Yeah, I just straight up think this card's not good. So I think that actually the best mode on this card is probably the first mode. But that mode is just too honest for the mana value that you have invested in this card. So it's just 4 mana, and then you get your first 1/1. 5 mana, you get your first draws a card, and then 7 mana, you get your second draws a card. 9 mana, you get your third. You see what I mean? This card just, none of the modes on this card, even if you're like interchanging them and getting the value that you want on the turn that you want, your rate is just so bad on this card, and you have to jump through hoops of having tapped creatures. And the only thing that's interesting about this card is just doing some weird wacky combo things with the 15 creatures, which is, I don't know, not like super hard to do, but it is like kind of annoying to get 15 creatures and have them tapped, especially since you need 5 white mana and you have to tap this to facilitate that effect. So you can't like tap out for like a Secure the Wastes and then just like win the game. You have to do that. You have to get them all tapped. You gotta pay a bunch of mana, all of it white mana. Then you gotta tap this, and you gotta do all of this and hope your opponents have no responses. Just the basic value and on the face of this card is just nothing to me. I just think this card's not good. But I mean, I guess I'm happy people like it. I hope people have fun times with this card, but I think this card just blows. But yeah, a card I do like though is Patch Up. This will be no surprise if you watched my white video. 2 and a white for a sorcery. Return up to 3 target creature cards with total mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So there's no way you can cheat the mana on this card. You can't like get a 3-drop, a 2-drop, and a 1-drop or something. But you can get like 2-drop, 1-drop, 0-drop, or 3 1-drops, or 2 1. You know, so there's just a lot of options for this card. This card can just get you a lot of you know, material and card advantage back for you. I just like this card quite a bit. The only downside to this card is that the fact that it's a sorcery. So you probably want to play this in a creature dense deck where you're, you know, cycling creatures from your graveyard onto the battlefield and that sort of thing. But then this isn't a creature in that deck. But I think this card is good enough where it's worth doing. I would say that this is one of the cards that's worth making it in, even though it's not a creature. I like Patch Up a lot. I think you'll see this card around. It's not catching much interest or hype right now, but I think over time this card will get some love. Next up, Rabble Rousing. 4 and a white for an enchantment. It has Hideaway of 5. Whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures, you create that many citizen creature tokens. Then if you control 10 or more creatures, you play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Now this card is pretty good at creating tokens for you. Because most of these cards usually will say, like, if you deal damage with a creature, you make a citizen or whatever. This just says, no. When you attack, you make that many citizens equal to your attackers, which is super sweet. You can just make so much material with this card. And since this card makes so much material, and it doesn't even care about attacking with non-token creatures, so the turn after, if like they kill your like a creatures that you attacked with or something, all the tokens you just made can attack and make more tokens. So yeah, this just creates so many creatures and so much material that you will actually reasonably be able to trigger this having 10 or more creatures clause, I think. So all that being said, even without triggering the Hideaway, which I think this can trigger fairly reliably, even without that, I think this card is playable. So yeah, Rabble Rousing's great. Rumor Gatherer. This is a card I like. 1 white for a 2/1 Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield and you control, you scry 1. And then if you do it, the second time you do that, you draw a card instead. So anytime a creature enters you, scry 1. And the second time that happens at a turn, you draw a card. This card's sweet. This card is reasonably costed. Will get you good consistent value. You'll be scrying a lot with this card. And it won't take long before your scries start adding up to like card draw, because you'll cycle through so many cards you don't want with all the scrying. And it still will draw you a card every once in a while. Yeah, I like Rumor Gatherer a lot. I think the rate on this card's good. I think it's well balanced. It's got the right CMC of 3. Yeah, I think this is a good card. You'll see this card quite a bit in Go Wide decks. Next, Sanctuary Warden, 4 white for a 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield with 2 shield counters on it. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may remove a counter from a creature or planeswalker you control. If you do, you draw a card and create a 1/1 citizen. Yeah, I like this card. I think this card's just reasonable value. The main thing I would be interested in is in a counters deck specifically, because I don't really want to waste my shield counters on this card. You know, I would rather the shield counters stay on it and try to help protect it. I don't mind throwing away one of the shield counters, I guess, when this enters. But yeah, I would really like to, you know, eat some random counters, like 1/1 counters or something that I have on a useless creature. But yeah, it draws you. It triggers immediately. You can immediately draw a card, make a citizen, and still have a shield counter on this, even if you have nothing else on the board. This is just really good, honest value. I think the rate on this card's probably a little high, but you will play this in Angel decks for sure. This is just a good Angel. And even in just generic white decks, I think this card's like fine. I would mostly be interested in like mono white for this card. Or like I said, specifically a counters deck. And then it'll be a reasonable role play in this deck. In that deck. This card's not broken or anything. It's just pretty decent. All-Seeing Arbiter. 4 blue for a 5/4 flyer. Very weird art. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, draw 2 cards and then discard a card. When you discard a card, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-0 till your next turn, where X is the number of different mana values among cards in your graveyard. This card's pretty interesting. The draw 2 and then discard a card immediately and attacking is pretty fair, but also like pretty good card selection, especially once you do it on the attack. Like when you play the turn you play this, drawing 2 cards and discarding a card's like fine. That's pretty reasonable value. But as soon as you get an attack with it, as soon as I untap and get to attack with this thing, I'm starting to feel pretty good. This thing doesn't protect itself in any way, but it does help protect you, because whenever you discard a card thing, it's kind of nice. It sounds like that you will trigger that effect from the draw discard thing, which you will, but also just anytime you discard a card. So if you're in like cycling, or you have a deck that just loots a lot, like Conniving and stuff, then that will trigger. And it doesn't care about the thing that you discard. It just cares about the number of different mana values in your graveyard. So if you can just discard lands or whatever whenever you discard anything, and it'll blank most of an attack, if not all of an attack. So that all being said, it sounds like I'm going to be pretty high on this card, but I'm not. I think this card's just fine. For a 6-drop, even though it's pretty good value and it does a decent amount of things, it doesn't really offer you anything outside of just kind of generic stuff, generic value. The main thing I would be interested in is if I could trigger that discard effect kind of whenever I wanted to. Like I said, if I was on a cycling or heavy connive deck, then maybe I would kind of like that second mode. But this card's just fine. It'll see some play, but it's not spectacular. Cut Your Losses, 4 blue for a sorcery with casualty 2. Target player mills half their library rounded down. So mill players rejoice. You got another mill tool. Notably, the casualty 2, they won't mill their entire deck. You will create a copy of this, and they resolve separately. So you'll mill half their deck, and then you'll mill half of their deck. So you'll mill 3/4 of the deck, basically. The rounded down's kind of a big deal here, though. Because if they have an odd number of cards and you like have a Brewvac out, then they'll still be left with something on their library, which is something. It's not guaranteed to mill your opponent out, even if you double the mill. But still, if you're a mill player, this is another pretty good tool for you. Yeah, 6 mana is a lot for this, but milling 3/4 of their library is about as much as you could ask for. So yeah, Cut Your Losses is solid for mill players. Even the Score, X and triple blue for an instant. The spell costs triple blue less to cast if an opponent has drawn 4 or more cards this turn. Draw X cards. I like this card. We have a lot of these effects where it's you know, triple blue X to draw cards, and then you get some other small upside, whether it's Scryfew or you know whatever. I think I just don't play effects like this. But if I did, this is probably the one I would go to outside of like Pull from Tomorrow, maybe. I don't think I would play Brain Geyser because I really don't. Yeah, I think yeah I think I would rather play this card if I'm reaching for X draw spells. This is definitely going to be on the top of my list, because if I'm reaching for that, that means I'm already not mad about paying this cost, but the upside of if an opponent casts a Brainstorm in a turn or something, then I got to draw even more cards. It's pretty nice upside. But the deck that I would play a draw X spell like this in is where I have a ton of instants where I can, you know, play a bunch of different stuff on people's end steps instead of, you know, just sitting there with this, leaving this up with no other options. Then it's pretty whatever if that's what you're playing. But if I'm playing a deck where I have an instant speed draw X spell, that's the kind of deck I'm playing it in. It's like a flash instant speed deck. So. And in those decks, I would say if I'm looking for a card like this, then this is probably one of the first ones I go to. This card's pretty sweet. Next up, one of the best cards in the set, Ledger Shredder. 1 and a blue for a 1/3 flyer. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, this connives. So that doesn't sound like a lot because you're not actually gaining card advantage. But this card will give you insane card selection. And eventually this will actually become a pretty annoying flying threat. This triggers each turn for each player, including yourself. So you can keep this thing conniving. Your opponents are going to make this thing connive all the time. This thing's not really worth a removal spell from your opponents. If they're removing this, honestly, you're probably pretty happy. Yeah, this card is just awesome, especially if you care about the discard effect. If you can take advantage of, you know, putting things in your graveyard where it's like you kind of drew a card when you put something in your graveyard that you want to be there anyway. Yeah, this card is just the real deal. Just play this in your blue decks, try it out, especially if you care about the discard, like I said. This card's the real deal. It's one of the best cards in the set. Next up, a little chat. 1 in a blue for an instant with Casualty 1. Look at the top 2 cards of your library. Put one of them in your hand and the other on the bottom of your library. I think this card's pretty sweet. The Casualty 1 is really nice. That's what I'm mostly looking to on this card. But honestly, I'm not like super upset if I have to just cast this for 2 mana. It's not like the best card, but being an instant is really nice on this card. If this card was a sorcery, this card would be unplayable. But being an instant makes this card definitely playable. Unfortunately, the other card you don't choose goes on the bottom of your library, which is a real bummer. If you could put it in your graveyard, then this card would be insane. But yeah, you do have to put it on the bottom of your library. All that being said, though, I think this card's pretty solid. Yeah, it'll see some play. An offer you can't refuse. Okay. Been thinking a lot about this card. It's a 1 blue for an instant. Counter target non-creature spell. Its controller creates 2 treasure tokens. So when I first read this card, I'm like, man, this card is awful. But I think this card is actually playable. So I've been thinking about this card a bit. And the way I've been kind of thinking about it is it's really good at protecting my stuff. So if I'm like casting some things that I really want to resolve and my opponent tries to counter them and I cast this, it's pretty unlikely they're going to have another interaction spell, let alone one that's just 2 mana. So I think it's really good for protecting your own stuff, especially since it's unconditional counter. And I think it's good in some circumstances offensively too. If your opponent's trying to resolve a pretty powerful non-creature spell, like a Ugin or something, if you hit them with this spell, a 1 mana 1-for-1, and all they get is 2 treasures, you still got rid of you still 1-for-1 them and traded them with a card, and then they only get 2 mana back from the exchange. Like, once again, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to be able to do something with that 2 mana, and if they are, I'm still pretty happy I stopped that Ugin. So I think this card is actually pretty playable. I don't think this card is like stellar. This isn't one of the first, counter interaction spells I'm going to when I'm in blue. But if I'm in like a 2-color deck with blue, then especially if I have, very important synergies that I need to protect, that maybe I don't have a ton of in the deck, or, a niche strategy that I need, then this is a very good defensive counter spell, I think. And it even has applications offensively too. So I think this card's actually playable. I'm never a person that completely counts a card out. This one was pretty close for me when I saw it. I really didn't want to give it much thought. And then I ended up with one in my hands, and I was kind of looking at a deck, and I'm like, I really want to try this card out just to see if it's as bad as I think it is. And I still haven't got to test it yet, but I've been kind of thinking about it in the application of the decks, in that deck and decks in general. And I think this card is just fine, actually. I think it's playable. Yeah, because I feel like somewhat frequently I want to put Dispel in my deck, but then it always gets cut because it's just too narrow in regular Commander. So I think this is the extra flexibility on this card. Catching any non-creature unconditionally is, I think it's worth it, actually, in some circumstances. So yeah, don't sleep on this card. Don't completely discount it. I think it's worth trying out in some circumstances, for sure. Next up is a hilarious card. I love this card. Public Enemy. 2 and a blue for an aura. And enchants a creature. All creatures attack enchanted creature's controller each combat if able. When an enchanted creature dies, you draw a card. So there's actually a surprising amount of flexibility in this card. If you're very ahead on board, you can put it on your own thing, and then you can just eat all of your opponent's creatures. Or if somebody's being really annoying and it doesn't seem like your opponents are unifying against the threat, especially if they're not dedicating very much to the board, then you can force them to do so, and you don't even put yourself out of card, because when the creature dies, you get your card back from this. So Yeah, notably, it's not when this enchantment goes to your graveyard. So if they like exile the creature or bounce it to their hand when you have this on it, you won't get your card back, which is not good. But you're pretty likely to get your card back from this. And the effect is kind of unique. There's not very many cards that are like this or even close to like this. So I think this card is funny and is cool and will make your games a lot funner. So yeah, I like that this card exists. I hope people play it. Next, Slip Out the Back. 1 blue mana for an instant. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature. It phases out. This card is surprisingly flexible. You can use it defensively if somebody's attacking you with a giant threat that might kill you or deal a huge chunk of damage. You can use it defensively to protect your commander or some really important piece, or like a token that you don't want to lose. Yeah, this card is just is pretty nice, pretty flexible. I think people should play the blue the March of the Swirling Mists more, the one that you can phase out X creatures with. And I think this will be a good gateway into why people should try that card, because people are going to try this card, I think, and be pretty happy with it. Yeah, I think Slip Out the Back's a good card. Yeah, it kind of speaks for itself. It's a very flexible card. It's not stellar, but the mana investment is so low, and you can use it defensively or more defensively. So yeah, I like Slip Out the Back. Angel of Suffering, 3 black for a 5/3 flyer. If damage would be dealt to you, prevent that much damage and mill twice that many cards. I think this card's actually pretty decent. I like this card. I don't think it's stellar by any means. It's also, most people usually go to, how do I damage myself to mill myself twice that many cards? But like, I don't know. I think this card is just decent on its own. It makes people not want to attack you while you're filling up your graveyard. And if you can incidentally hurt yourself, like if I'm playing a red-black deck and I want to sacrifice things anyway, then I can start using the Goblin Bombardment to ping myself, to mill myself for more or something. Yeah, there's some ways you can kind of hurt yourself with this card, and yeah, fill your graveyard pretty quick. I think it's just a reasonable card. I think a lot of people are saying this card just sucks. I don't think it's stellar or anything, but I think it's cool. It'll see some play. I like the card. Next up, Body Launder is a very good card. 2 black for a 3/3 with Death Touch. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, Body Launderer connives. It's pretty decent. Whenever Body Launderer dies, return target non-rogue creature card with equal or lesser mana or equal or lesser power from your graveyard to the battlefield. This card is just very easy to loop with, right? Like you can bring back Karmic Guides with this, which will bring this back, and just all sorts of different stuff you can do with this. Even in honest applications, this card's just good. It's just a good rate, good card. It just will help you, get some card selection and put things in your graveyard that you want to put there anyway. Also, it has the backup plan of getting you a new card when this dies. Death Touch will be very annoying on this card. People will not want to attack into this, especially since it will get you a card to replace it when it dies. Yeah, Body Launder, even outside of combo applications, even in just generic value, this card is very good, very sweet. You'll see this card a lot. Next up is a very bad card. Cemetery Tampering. 2 and a black for an enchantment. Hideaway 5. This is the black hideaway. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 3 cards. Then, if there are 20 or more cards in your graveyard, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Wow. This card is really bad. So this card, the rate on this card is just not good. You don't get the mill until your upkeep. You only get to mill 3 cards. And then you only get to get your card when you have 20 or more cards in your graveyard. If I'm wanting to mill myself, like if I have 20 or more cards in my graveyard, I don't need this stupid hideaway card. I'll have way better things to do out of cards in my graveyard. And like this card, this card just incentivizes your opponents to exile your graveyard even more. Because they're going to see this card and be like, oh, we don't want him to get that free card. We better exile his graveyard before he gets 20 cards in it. But, like, I want to, like, stop them from exiling my graveyard for as long as possible if I want 20 or more cards in my graveyard. Like, I don't want to incentivize them at all to exile my graveyard. Just having a graveyard is probably should be incentive enough, but if they aren't incentivized, then I don't want to incentivize them even more. So yeah, there's just a lot wrong with this card. I do not like this card at all. I think this card blows. Don't play this card. Part of the reason I want to talk about this card is I expect to see this card a decent amount, and I think it really sucks. So yeah, don't play this card. Next up, Arcane Bombardment. This is a very interesting one. 4 red for an enchantment. When you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, exile an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard. Then copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment. You may cast any number of copies without paying their mana costs. This card's pretty cool. There's not many room in your spell slinging decks for enchantments. You just got like 1,000 Year Storm, the one we talked about earlier, and I think this is one of them that you could play for sure. This card will add up very quickly to accrue you a lot of value and recursion. It triggers only once each turn, but it is each turn, so your instance, which you'll probably be playing a lot of in your Spellslinger deck, will trigger during your opponent's turns. It doesn't care about the mana value of the card you exile or the card you cast. It just starts exiling. It just keeps churning through all of them and then casting them a ton of times. It doesn't care about timing, so if you... it tells you that you can cast the sorceries that exile with it on your opponent's turns when you trigger it on your opponent's turns. So yeah, this card is not like as threatening as 1,000 Year Storm is, so people are not going to remove on side it like 1,000 Year Storm, I don't think. But this card, I think, will add up very quickly and snowball very quickly. Yeah, I think this card's pretty sweet. I don't think it's broken. I think it's just good, and it is worth playing. Big Score. 3 and a red for an instant. Additional cost, you discard a card, draw a card, and create 2 treasures. We already have this card in 2 forms. We have Pirate's Pillage, which is this card, but a sorcery. And then we also have Unexpected Windfall, which is this card, but it's 2 red. So it's a little bit more restrictive mana cost. So this is just the best version of this effect that we've gotten, because it has the least restrictions. It's 3 and a red, so it's the easiest to cast out of them, and it's an instant. Unlike the card that has the same mana. So, yeah. Big Score is just a good card. Unexpected Windfall and Pirate's Pillage see a good amount of play. I doubt you'd want to play all 3 of them in the same deck. But you could. But the ones that you should play are, the instants. So you don't have to play Pirate's Pillage anymore. You can play Big Score and Unexpected Windfall. If you really want all 3, then you can play all 3. But I'm happy we have this card. I don't have to play Pirate Splendor as a sorcerer anymore. But yeah, this card will see a decent amount of play. This is a good card. Glittering Stockpile. I like this card. 2 and a red for an artifact treasure. Tapped out a red, you put a stash counter on this. You sacrifice this, and you add X mana of any one color to your mana pool. X is the number of stash counters on this. Notably, it's a treasure for what it's worth. This card's cool. It's a Manalith, 3 mana rock. We don't often play those, so they have to give us a decent amount of utility before we start looking to those to play it. And I think that this could be worth it in some decks. Because as you tap it, it starts accruing those counters, and when you want to cash it in for more than 1 mana later on in the game, if you have some big X spell and you don't want this just to tap for 1 mana, you want to get the most out of that X spell or whatever, then this is a really good option for you. I like this quite a bit better than Replicating Ring, which reads a lot similar to this card, but you don't get the option of, extra mana from it until you made the obscene number of hitting like 8 or whatever counters on it, and then you finally get all of it, all your Replicating Rings or whatever. So yeah, I like this card quite a bit more than that card, and I think this card is definitely playable. I'm only probably playing it in red decks that aren't green, but yeah, I think this card is pretty sweet. I like this card. It's a Manalith that's worth playing. Next up, another one of the best cards in the set. Professional Facebreaker. 2 and a red for a 2/3 with Menace. It's a human warrior. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. Sacrifice a treasure token, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. This card's just very good. You can get up to 3 treasures a turn by hitting each of your opponents, just like you would with like a Tymna effect. But also this gives you the outlet if you don't need the treasures and you'd rather have cards, You can sack a treasure to get a card until the end of turn, which is a very, very good rate. And you can play it. So if it's a land, you can play your land. Yeah, this card is just very good. In Treasure Tribal decks, this card's going to go bananas. You're going to sack so many treasures to this card to, draw cards. But even without that, this is just a good rate. This card has Menace, so it helps this card get in there too if you play it on turn 3. So yeah, this card is just excellent. Yeah, it's especially nuts in Treasure Tribal, but even in just Attacks Red's deck, you'll be happy to play this card. This card's going to see a ton of play. Next up, Sticky Fingers. 1 red mana for an aura. Enchanted creature has. When enchanted creature has Menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you create a treasure token. When an enchanted creature dies, draw a card. Man, the amount of things that this thing does for 1 red mana is kind of insane. Menace, and when it hits them, they get a treasure token. So it helps the creature get in there. And when it does, you get your mana back immediately. And you get your card back when the creature dies. This card just has way too many words on it. For 1 mana, you just put this on a creature, you get your mana back immediately. When this thing dies, you get a card back. You're out nothing for this card. Like, it's really hard to miss with this card. It is saying something that you have to draw this, play this, and then wait to get your card back from it. And you get your mana back immediately from it, probably, but getting the card back from it's a little annoying. But as soon as you get more than 1 treasure from this card, I think you're feeling really good. So yeah, you probably want to play this in either Treasure Tribal or a deck that's really low to the ground, like Ragavan, or deck that has a 2 mana commander that wants to attack or something. Yeah, don't sleep on this card. This card, even though it's a common, does a lot. So yeah, Sticky Fingers is a pretty good card. Structural Assault. I really like this card. 3 red for sorcery. Destroy all artifacts. Then this deals damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that are put into graveyards from the battlefield this turn. So this is just a really nice Shattering Spree effect, which honestly I want more of. I don't want just Vandal Blast anymore. I really want Shattering Spree-like effects. Byforce, I don't think quite cuts it. Byforce is nice if you want to blow up 2 artifacts, but as soon as people start creating tons of treasure, you just need to get rid of it all at once. And the nice thing is this also kills creatures too. So this is a Vandal Blast that kills all creatures. Obviously you lose your artifacts too, but it's definitely worth it here. Especially since this counts the artifacts that were sacked before this thing comes in. So if they try to sack their treasures in response, you're still going to kill everything. And I think 99% of the time when you cast this card, it's going to kill all the creatures too, because there's just so many artifacts running around, mana rocks, treasures, all that stuff nowadays that, yeah, this is just going to kill artifacts and creatures, and that's a pretty nice, red version of Austere came in to me. So, yeah, I like Structural Assault a lot. I think this card is going to see a ton of play. It's really cheap right now, even for the extended art foils. So I would recommend picking up yours if you haven't already. Next up, Widespread Thieving. 2 and a red for an enchantment with Hideaway 5. So this is the red Hideaway. Whenever you cast a multicolored spell, create a treasure token. Then you can play Wooburg. If you do, you cast the Hideaway spell. This card is obviously can only go in 5-color decks. But this card will definitely find some homes. If you're a multicolor matters deck, then this card's going to be crazy in your deck. Like a Niv Mizzet deck or a Ravos deck or something, then this card is going to be a card you're going to be very happy to see. The Wooburg Caster Hideaway card is it's fine. Especially since you're going to be in 5 colors, you don't have to sack your treasures to do that mode. But yeah, it's the Hideaway is just nice upside. I would just play this card just for the effect of casting a multicolor spell, create a treasure in my 5-color deck. So. Yeah, I think this card's good. If you're playing 5 colors, try it out. Especially if you have a lot of gold cards in your deck. Witty Roastmaster. This is a card that's very slept on. 2 and a red for a 3/2. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Its impact tremors on a creature. That's stellar. Right now, I want as many of these effects as I can get in my red decks. If I want to play Impact Tremors and Perforos, if then I want as many of these effects as we can get. And right now we don't have a ton of them. We have this Impact Tremors, Perforos, Warstorm Surge, and then we have a few other random ones like Pandemonium that is symmetrical, which is scary. Terror of the Peaks. Yeah, so I will take every version of this effect I can get. This one's on a creature, which is nice upside for decks that care about creatures, which you probably do if you're playing Impact Tremors and Terror of the Peaks. So yeah, the more of these effects, the better. And we don't have as many of these effects as it seems, so very happy to have Witty Roastmaster. You will see this card a lot as more people realize it's in the set. I think people just skimmed over it because it's a common, probably, because I don't hear a lot of people talking about this card, but yeah, this card is excellent. Next up, oh boy. Need a drink for this one. Bootlegger Stash. 5 and a green. Artifact. Land you control have. Tap. Create a treasure token. I don't think this card is actually very good. I don't think it's very good. So you should probably just play mana doublers if you're thinking about playing this card. Like, green has so many mana doublers. At this mana cost, you have Mana Reflection for 6 mana, and that one also works for your, you know, your other mana producing permanents. Nyx Bloom Ancient is 1 more mana than this, and you get triple mana. A lot of times when you play Nyx Bloom Ancient, if you have any other lands that are untapped or mana sources that are untapped, it'll probably pay for the Nyx Bloom Ancient's mana immediately. This card is just not very good. You tap out on 6 to play this card, and then you gotta wait to untap to tap your lands to get treasures. So then you're kind of storing the mana, and you're not getting any immediate advantage. So like, to me, this goes in like it goes in a couple specific places. It has some good homes, don't get me wrong, but the fact that the amount of hype this card is getting is like so overblown, it's ridiculous. Now I think part of the reason it's getting a lot of hype is the people that are in the know that this card is just funny, because green getting tons of treasure production is like probably shouldn't be in green's wheelhouse when they can already land ramp, which is way better anyway, because the other colors need this more. But anyway, I think a lot of people are taking this as they hear people in the community talking about this card, and they just think it's good because they hear people talking about it. But yeah, I think most people most like content creators and stuff are kind of smart enough to realize that this card's not actually very good. But it does have some homes where it can be good. So one is like treasure tribal decks, making the treasure. It's basically just, this card is good in decks that care about the fact that it's making treasure/artifacts. So treasure tribal would like this card because you have things that actually allow you to produce more than 1 treasure per land. So you have things like Zorn and Jolene now. Also, you have things that pay off creating treasures, such as Rain of Riches that we looked at earlier, that allows you to cascade as you sack these treasures. So these treasures need to do more for you than something than just being a treasure. It's also good in decks that care about producing artifacts. So, you know, green-black decks that have like that use like Marionette Master as like a win condition or something. Those sort of decks, which are also probably going to be treasure decks in that case, but you get my point. It's just, this card is good in decks that can make the treasure tokens more than just tap to sack a mana for a mana. If you can make that treasure give you some extra effect that is of good upside for you, or the fact that you are making artifacts that you can easily sack benefits you in some way to help you win the game, then Bootlegger Stash is potentially worth the slot. Even in those decks, this card is like kind of hard to pass, because this 6 mana is just so much for this card. And then like, yeah, you aren't generating any extra mana advantage generally with this card on its face. So you just have to have a lot of other things going on for this card to be good in your deck. And even then, it's like, it won't be the best card in your deck. It'll just be a good card. That'll actually be worth playing. But yeah, this card is just fine. Bad in most decks and reasonable in the decks that you want to play it in, which is not very many. Yeah, that's Bootlegger Stash. And I don't think I'm wrong about this one. I think when I look back on this video in a couple months, I will think the same, if not more so, of what I think. Next up, Fight Rigging. the green Hideaway. 2 and a green for Hideaway 5 again, enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Then if you control a creature with power 7 or greater, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. This card's just fine. It's solid. Each combat, putting a 1/1 counter on a creature you control is like pretty reasonable for 3 mana. And then you're basically going to guarantee get your Hideaway card off of this eventually. Because just controlling a creature with power 7 or greater, that's just going to happen in your green decks, especially when you can pump them at all with this. Notably, one important thing that you may miss on first glance of this card is the creature that you put the 1/1 counter on doesn't have to be the creature that has power 7 or greater. Most effects that do this usually say that. This doesn't. It just says put a counter on a creature you control. Then if you control a creature, any creature, not the one you target, just a creature with power 7 or greater, then you get the card off your Hideaway. So I think that's nice. It allows you to kind of spread your power around a little bit. You don't have to just keep all ending on the biggest thing just to get this thing to trigger. Eventually, you're just going to play a fat idiot, and then this thing's just going to get you your card. So this card's just it's just a reasonable card on its face. Just gives you counters here and there. It triggers immediately. It triggers the combat that you play this on. And then eventually you get a cheat a spell in that might be worth more mana than you even paid for this. So I think this card's just a solid role player. This card's not broken or like stellar, but it's just a good card. The rate's good on this. It's worth playing. I would probably play it in a 1/1 counters deck. Yeah, even if you just play this generically in like a green budget deck or something, you'll be happy with this card. Next, Galagritas. Green and a white for a 1/1. When a creature enters the battlefield under your control, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You put a 1/1 counter on this. You create a tap treasure token, and you gain 2 life. So I hate this card, but I hate this card specifically just because it says tap treasure token, because they figured out how to fix treasure, but then they just only did it on like 2 cards in the set, and it just like tilts the fuck out of me. But yeah. Anyway, this card's pretty solid though. Each turn, creating a tap treasure token is very reasonable. I would want to be in a creature heavy deck probably before I play this card, because the put a 1/1 counter on this and gain 2 life are like not really that stellar. They're nice to have. They're good options, but they're just extra gravy for me creating my tap treasure token once a turn off this card. Yeah, this card's solid. I would probably only play it in like treasure tribal decks, but in those decks, I think you'll be happy to have this card. I think it's a solid card. Torpiri Stomper, 1 green for a 4/4 with Vigilance. It's a plant dinosaur. When it enters the battlefield, you search library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. This can't attack or block unless you control 7 or more lands. This is bigger Farhaven Elf, but it's not strictly better than Farhaven Elf. So one thing that I think is very important about Farhaven Elf is the 2 generic and a green. Because the decks that Farhaven Elf gets played in is almost always budget decks. And in budget decks, it's very important that you are not having to pay double green to fix your mana. Which is, pretty important. Having said that, this card is going to be a budget playable card, I think. I don't think this card's going to be a couple dollars or anything. This card should be like 50 cents or whatever. That being said, I would probably just also play this in my budget decks. I would... Like, it would take me a little bit more consideration if I was, like, in 3-color plus in budget. Then I might not play this card. I might stick to more mana rocks then if I can, because even though you don't generally want to play mana rocks in green decks, being on budget is pretty important to have mana rocks, because you're not always going to have your green mana, because you're not going to have a ton of dual lands. Well, you are, but they're all going to be tapped. But I think there's some... not budget decks that have been playing Farhaven Elf that probably shouldn't be. But this card's a much more reasonable Farhaven Elf. Those decks can cut Farhaven Elf and put this in and feel much better about it. Because this card's definitely playable for sure. The having to control 7 or more lands for this thing to attack or block is like totally fine. I'll take that, honestly, for the rate that you get this at. Because Farhaven Elf, it's just kind of a... You just throw it away randomly at some point in the game anyway to a chump block. But this one can at least attack and block reasonably. It can't do it immediately, but it won't take long for this to do this, because you'll have 4 lands when this comes into play. And then you'll quickly hit 7 in a turn or 2. So, yep. Torpiri Stomper is not a stellar card, but it is a really cool card, and I love Plant Dinosaur. That's such a great type. Venom Connoisseur, 1 in the green for 2/2 human druid. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, this gains Death Touch. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, all creatures you control gain Death Touch. Don't sleep on this effect. This effect is incredibly annoying for your opponents to block you. So if you're in Death Touch Tribal, I think this card's really nice. Which that deck I feel like has been getting more and more support as time is going on. Especially like green black Death Touch, and red even has got some Death Touch love. With Zagar, whatever that red black dude that cares about partying is, that gives all your creature like Death Touch or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of this archetype is getting has been getting quite a bit of support consistently, and this is one of the better support cards they've gotten. So keep your eyes on this card if that's a deck that you're interested in building. All right, we're to the gold cards. We're coming up on the end. Just bear with me a little bit longer. Black Market Tycoon. Red and a green for 2/2. At the beginning of your upkeep, Black Market Tycoon deals 2 damage to you for each treasure you control. You can tap this to make a treasure. I really don't like this card. I do not think this card is good. Even in Treasure Tribal, I don't like this card. So for me, one important thing about treasure decks is one reason that makes treasures good. It's like, you know, it refunds you mana on things that you cast, which is nice. It's an artifact, which is nice. But it's also, I can just store it up. I don't have to use it. I can just keep it whenever I want to use it. I can, you know, let it loose. This card heavily disincentivizes you on doing that. And your only upside is that you get a 2/2 that produces 1 treasure each turn, and it has Summoning Sickness. The juice is not worth the squeeze on this one, especially since this one is 2 colors. So your mana restriction on this card is actually fairly real. Yeah, I don't think this card's playable like anywhere. I don't think it's good in Treasure Tribal, especially because you're gonna have a ton of treasures, more than you're gonna know what to do with, and then you're gonna have them sit there and dome you for 14 unless you know, kill this thing or whatever. So I think this card just sucks. I don't think you want to play this in budget. You definitely don't want to play it in Treasure Tribal. I don't think this card has any homes. I just want to talk about it because I feel like people are going to play this card, but I don't think this card's good. Even if you look at it just like a 2-mana mana dork, we just have a million better 2-mana mana dorks. We have better 1-mana mana dorks. So yeah, I'm just not interested in playing this card at all. Next up, we have another common. Body Dropper. Red and a black for a 2/2. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, put a 1/1 counter on Body Dropper. You can pay a red and a black to sacrifice another creature. This will gain menace till end of turn. This card is not the best version of this effect, but the jury effects of when you sacrifice things, these creatures get counters. Is in the decks that you want this like effect, you'll take any number of these you can get, even if some are worse than others. So I think Blood Aspirant's the other one that's 3 mana that does basically the same thing as Jury. It gets a 1/1 counter whenever you sacrifice anything. Jury's obviously the best of them because when you sack him, you gotta deal a ton of damage to something. But yeah, I think so. I have a budget Jury deck where it's like a budget sacrifice / fling deck for Jury. Yeah, and I very frequently, even in a bulk budget deck, I frequently just combo people out of nowhere and just dome them for like 30 because of cards like this. So that deck I'm going to put this card in. Decks where you're going to be sacrificing a lot of stuff, this card will just get huge. Yeah, and then it's I would keep this card in mind if you're building like a deck like this where it sacrifices things a lot, like a Crash deck or something, where you're going to be flinging giant idiots at people and stuff. So don't sleep on Body Dropper. This card's not amazing, but it definitely will have some homes. You'll see this card. Broker's Ascendancy, 1 green blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. I think this card's fine. The putting a loyalty part on this card is just like a little bit of extra gravy. If you're like a Oops All Planeswalkers deck, this is not a card I would reach to. I would rely much more on like Proliferate when I can control the timing of it and I can do it during my turn. So then I might be able to hit an ultimate when I otherwise wouldn't have. So yeah, I wouldn't play this in Planeswalker decks. I'm mostly just interested in like go wide +1 counters decks. But even in those decks, like in Bant, I surely have better options if I'm in 3 colors. If this card was just like mono white or like mono one of these colors, then I would be in on this card. But just the fact that this requires you to be in Bant makes me off this card for the most part. Just because I will just have better options when I'm in that many colors. From Cathar's Crusades to, you name it. So, yeah, I think this card will see a decent amount of play, but I don't think it'll deserve it. I think this card's just kind of whatever. Unlike it is in draft where it's completely broken. Endless Detour. Green, white, blue for an instant. The owner of target spell, non-land permanent, or card in a graveyard puts it on the top or bottom of their library. This card is just insanely flexible. But it's not good. The interesting... Yeah, I mean, this card just can hit like anything, right? Hits things on the stack, hits things on battlefield, hits things in graveyards. The only problem with this card is that the owner of it gets to choose where it goes. So if they want the thing back, they put it on top. And if they don't want to draw it again, they put it on bottom. The nice thing is that also works for you. So if you target your own thing in your graveyard or your own spell, your own mono-lane permanent, you can put it on top of your deck if you want it. You probably won't put it on the bottom of your deck for obvious reasons. Because otherwise you probably wouldn't be casting this card. But yeah, anyway. Endless Detour. Very cool card. Super flexible, but just not really that good. I think it will see some play. And just the flexibility alone of this card will mean that it will sometimes perform okay. But yeah, I wouldn't hold my breath on this card. Don't try to fit this card in your deck. It's not really that good. It is fun and flexible, though. So can't fault people for running it. But this card's just not very good. Just know that going in. Maestro's Ascendancy. Red, black, blue for an enchantment. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard by sacrificing a creature in addition to paying its other costs. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard exile instead. So this is once again another enchantment that's being asked to put into your spell slinger deck. But now I think we're getting to the point now that we're running out of slots. We've talked about a few that we want to include. There's some that already exist out there that you want to include. I don't think this one's quite going to make the cut. This one just asks a bit too much of you, I think. You got to pay 3 mana for this enchantment that doesn't really do anything. The one nice thing about this card is you can do the thing immediately. You can cast one of your things immediately because it doesn't require you to go to instep or upkeep or anything. It just says during each of your turns you can cast instant or sorcery from your graveyard. But just the cost of doing that effect is just really high. This enchantment doesn't help you do it in any way. It makes you pay the cost of the spell and sacrifice a creature. So, yeah, I just don't think the juice is quite worth the squeeze on this one. If you end up including this in a deck, you probably won't be like super disappointed by it, but I just think you only have so many slots for non-instants and sorceries in your instants and sorceries deck, and this one just doesn't seem like it's quite there for me. I would consider trying it out just for fun, but I wouldn't expect this to... if I was optimizing a deck, I wouldn't expect this to stay in. Next up, a card I really hate the design of. Obnixless the Adversary. 1 black and a red. Casualty X. And the casualty is create a copy of this card that isn't legendary and has loyalty X. So right there, you already know why I don't like this card. Because it makes non-legendary versions of itself. Nice balancing. +1. Each opponent loses 2. Oh, it starts at 3 loyalty. +1. Each opponent loses 2 life unless they discard a card. If you control a demon or devil, you gain 2 life. -2. You create a devil token, which when it dies, you deal 1 damage to any target. -7. Target player draws 7 cards and loses 7 life. Yeah. I mean, this card is just really annoying and stupid. I think the design of this card is just awful. Getting 2 planeswalkers for the cost of 1 and the cost of only 3 mana, and you just have to sack some random dumb idiot if you just want to get, one that ticks up and one that ticks down or something. But it also has extra upside of if you have a giant creature later that you got your value out of, or just a giant creature lying around, you can just play this, sack that creature immediately, and just draw a new hand. Because I guess we need 3 mana Gristlebrand. I guess. I don't know. This card's stupid. I hate this card. I don't think it's like insane or anything, but it is obnoxious. It will see some play. It'll be playable. You'll definitely see it in tables, but I just really hate this card. I just think the design is super lame. I don't like looking at this card. Next card. Obscure Charm. Blue, black, white for an instant. Choose or return multicolored permanent with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Counter an instant or sorcery. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. This card, all 3 modes are pretty reasonable on this card. The only thing with this card is it's really hard to get a mana advantage with this card. Because the things you destroy are things that are this mana or less. The thing that you return has to be multicolored and has to be this CMC or less, which is hard to do. Well, not hard to do, but your options are much more limited. And then countering an instant or sorcery, most of them are not going to be giant. Most instant sorceries that get played in Commander are like, counter spells or whatever. Removal spells, Doom Blades. Not Doom Blades specifically, but you get my point. Yeah, I think this card's fine. This card's got enough flexibility. All the modes do different but useful things, but none of them are stellar. I think this will probably be a pretty good card in a budget deck. If you're optimizing a deck, this probably gets cut. But, yeah, the modes on this card are good. All of them are reasonable. The flexibility on this card is nice. Yeah, solid card. Riveteer's Ascendancy. This is pretty obviously the best Ascendancy for Commander. Green, black, red for an enchantment. When you sacrifice a creature, you may return target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Do this only once each turn. So unlike a lot of the other Ascendancies, they ask a lot of you. They ask a lot of your time, or they ask a lot of your resources to do their thing. This card will just do its thing. This card can just slot into a Jund Sacrifice deck and will just get you insane value just on its face. And unlike a lot of the other Ascendancies that either only trigger like on your turn or are harder to do on, you can do them on each turn, but it's harder to do because you have to invest mana into them. This asks no mana investment from you. All it asks is that you just sacrifice things, which we have a billion free sack outlets in Commander. And all of them are playable and get played. And they get played in this deck where this card will be played. So yeah, this card will just generate insane value. Even though this only triggers once each turn, that's fine. You'll just, as the turns go around the table, you'll just sack on this turn, sack on this turn, sack on this turn. So yeah, I think this card's just easily the best Ascendancy. This card's very playable. You'll definitely see this card. Riveteer's Charm. Red, green, black. Instant. Choose one. Target opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker they control with the highest CMC among creatures or planeswalkers they control. Exile the top 3 cards of your library until end of your next end step. You may play those cards. Exile target player's graveyard. So the Obscure Charm had 3 good modes that were all like on rate, and this one has 2 modes that are, I would say, slightly above rate, and then 1 mode that's kind of useless, but it's nice to have, I guess. Obviously, the first 2 modes are what I'm mostly looking to cast this card for. They're a little bit above rate. Because the exiling 3 cards, playing until your next end step, so I can cast this on my turn, so I can play a land, then my next turn play a land from it, or I can leave this up, go around the table, the opponent before my turn's play, or I can leave up this removal spell, this kind of soul shatter effect, or if nothing else happens, then I can exile the top 3 cards of my library. I really like that versatility of it, leaving up your removal spell while also leaving up your card draw spell on the same card. It's really nice. The exile target player's graveyard for 3 mana is a really bad rate. But honestly, Rakdos Charm for that effect for only 2 mana saved me many games doing that. So I'm happy that mode's there. It's definitely you will if you're playing this card in your deck, every once in a while you will have to cast this mode for that effect. And even though the rate will feel bad, the result of the spell will feel really good because you will stop somebody from winning or killing you. So yeah, I think this card is the most playable of the charms. I don't think it's stellar, but the versatility is really nice with this card. So I think this card's playable, especially in budget. Scheming Fence, blue and a white for a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a non-land permanent. Activated abilities of the chosen permanent can't be activated. Scheming Fence has all activated abilities of the chosen permanent except for loyalty abilities. You can spend mana as though or a mana of any color to activate those abilities. So this card reads really, really weird, but I think this card's pretty good. If somebody's got a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring, you just name that when you play this, and then you have a super sweet Mana Dark with none of the downsides, and you get to like temporarily blow up their Mana Rock. So yeah, I think this card's just good, even just doing that mode. But it also has some extra utility of shutting off a Planeswalker. You won't be able to get the Planeswalker's abilities, but at least you can shut it off if it's like really dangerous, about to alter something. If they have like a a sack outlet creature on board, like a Visceracy or something, you'll probably be happy to shut that off. Yeah, this card is much more flexible than it looks. And I think the floor of this card is pretty high. Yeah, I think this card's just solid. You'll definitely see this card, and it will be very annoying if you're playing against it. Next up, Soul of Emancipation. 4 green, white, blue for 5/7. When it enters the battlefield, disrupt to 3 other target non-land permanents. For each of those permanents, its controller creates a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. So this card, unlike Terrastodon, really incentivizes you to blow up your own stuff, while Terrastodon is much more wants you to blow up your opponent's stuff. Because giving them 3/3 flyers is much, much worse than giving them 3/3 elephants. Or whatever Terrastodon gives them. I think he gives them elephants. Yeah, because this thing can't block those flyers like Terrastodon can block those elephants. And flyers are actually really annoying. They can actually hit you, deal damage to you, kill your planeswalkers, whatever. So yeah, but if you're blowing up your own stuff with this card, then this provides you with a ton of power on the board for the mana across 4 bodies. That being said, for 7 mana, I think this card is just pretty whatever. Even if you do blow up 3 of your things, this maybe you just get board wiped immediately, and then you lost a ton of materials. So yeah, I think this card is just fine. It'll be a good budget card, as long as it is budget. I assume it will be. This will be a fine budget card, but yeah, I wouldn't play this in like any sort of tune deck. I just don't think there's enough flexibility here. I don't think it's a threat. I don't think it's that worth blowing up your own stuff, even though angels are much better than elephants. So yeah, this card's just kind of whatever. I'd rather play Terrastodon. Stimulus Package. 2 green, red for a enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 treasure tokens. You can sacrifice a treasure to make it a citizen. I think this card sucks really bad. I think this card's a trap. I think people are going to play this in their treasure decks and be very disappointed. Sacking your treasures to create citizens is just doesn't seem worth it. If that was just an effect you had all the time, that would be a pretty nice effect to have. But the fact that I gotta pay 4 mana for an enchantment to just have that effect, and I only get 2 treasures out of the yeah, this card's just not worth it. It's not worth running. It's not worth me spending a card for this effect, even though it gives me 2 of my mana back. The investment up front is just too much for this card. It doesn't consistently produce treasures. It gives me like the most small treasure payoff of all time. Yeah, I think this card's a trap. I don't think you should play this card. Yeah, enough said. I don't think this card's good. Void Rend. Black, blue, white for an instant. This spell can't be countered. Destroy target non-land permanent. I think this card's good, but I think this card is getting overhyped for sure. A lot of people are comparing this to Anguish Unmaking and saying that they favor this more, and I think that's just straight up wrong. I think Anguish Unmaking is actually significantly better than this card. This spell can't be countered is I don't think that's very much of an effect that matters for casual commander. The extra mana pip of being blue rather than colorless is actually a pretty tough ask, I would say. And then it destroying it instead of exiling the non-land permanent is a pretty major downside to me. Exile is such a huge deal in Anguish Unmaking. Getting rid of something forever is just such a nice effect. The losing the 3 life is nothing. I could care less about losing the 3 life. The less restrictive mana cost and the exile is much more important to me than making the spell not be counterable. That all being said, I think that if you are an Esper, you're looking for a removal spell, this is probably what I'm going to. But don't get fooled. I'm definitely playing like Swords to Plowshares, Anguish Unmaking, probably probably Generous Gift too, because I like the flexibility of being able to blow up lands if I need to, because and the less restrictive mana cost once again. So yeah, Void Rend is like my 4th or 5th removal spell, even in Esper that I'm looking at going to. So this card's just all right. It might make your Esper decks, but like I think this card's being overhyped for sure. Luxior, Giada's Gift. 1 mana for a legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on it. Equipped permanent isn't a planeswalker and is a creature in addition to its other types. Equip planeswalker for 1 mana. Equip 3 for regular creatures. I don't think this card's very good. I mean, there's some cute things you can do with it, I guess. The idea of protecting your planeswalkers with this card just seems like nonsense to me. Turning your planeswalker into another super easy to interact with permanent type and creature is like it's kind of nothing to me. The interesting things to me with this card is when you actually equip it to a creature, then you can do some goofy things like with Devoted Druid, you make infinite mana, and you know most people know that. But there's a lot of other effects that you can do with this sort of this little cute text of giving a creature +1 for each counter on it. But yeah, if you're playing planeswalkers, like if you're looking to equip this to a planeswalker, you're probably playing a pretty planeswalker heavy deck. And then to me, I don't want to if I'm playing a planeswalker deck, I don't want to turn my planeswalkers into creatures, because if all my permanents are planeswalkers, like my opponents are forced to kind of interact with them usually in combat. Most people don't really play removal spells that hit planeswalkers. They usually just attack them and kill them. So if I just turn on their removal spells into being able to destroy my planeswalker creatures, and then all I get is just, you know, something that can attack and block, it's like, I don't know. I don't really understand this card. I know some people are really gonna enjoy it, and I'm happy for them. I think this card's cute. I don't think this card is good. I think it's quite the opposite, actually. I think this card's bad. I think turning your planeswalkers into creatures is generally worse, especially if you're playing this card in your deck, because that means you're probably going to be playing a lot of planeswalkers, and then you definitely don't want to turn them into creatures, because planeswalkers. I'm going to have the planeswalker video soon of why I think planeswalkers are the worst permanent type in Commander. I'm going to make that video soon, but as a little bit of a teaser, I think planeswalkers are very bad in general in Commander, because your opponents can just attack them and kill them, and you have 3 opponents, so you have 3 people that can attack and kill them, and especially if they're threatening planeswalkers, then they're just more incentivized to do it. People usually will leave random creatures just lying around if they don't have anything to attack. Then they'll be like, oh, this planeswalker's a free attack, it doesn't make anybody mad, and it's just something that, you know, a permanent that I can get rid of for free, basically, so I might as well. Yeah, but when you're actually in a planeswalker specific deck, then it's like your opponents don't really have much removal that can interact with you, and your deck is more suited to like keep your planeswalkers harder to kill, because that's what your deck is built to do. And then planeswalker like Super Friends decks can be annoying to interact with. So in that specific strategy, planeswalkers can be good. But in those strategies, that would be the only strategy I could see you wanting to play this card in. Because otherwise you are just not going to have enough things that you want to equip this to, you know. And then all of a sudden you're doing the opposite of what your deck wants to do. You equip this to a planeswalker, and then you turn on all their removal, and then it's like, I don't know. It just seems counterintuitive to me. So yeah, I don't like this card. I don't think it's very good. The decks that you want to play it in, I think it's kind of anti-synergy with. So some people are going to have fun with it, being able to attack with their Elspeths or whatever. So, I mean, good for them. But this card's obviously not for me. I don't think it's very good. It'll probably be fun, though. So, yeah. Good for the people that are going to enjoy it, I guess. All right. So, last card of the set review. We did it. Thanks for sticking with me, everybody. If there's any cards you think I missed that you would like me to talk about, feel free to comment or let me know. Of course, ask me my opinions. You know, I love giving opinions on things, Magic cards. So yeah, I think I feel pretty good about my list. I think it's pretty comprehensive. I think the cards I didn't mention, you probably won't see much of, and probably aren't worth playing. But maybe I missed something. So yeah, feel free to give me a holler. Let me know if you like this format better than the last one. I'll work on making the card image just a little bit bigger for next time, but I was kind of rushing to get this out. So once again, thanks for tuning in. Cheers, everybody. See you next time.